Hello, we are JahFlor, an art and agroecology project based in Vieques, Puerto Rico. Welcome to our second vlog of 2023. In this episode, we will take you on a historical tour of the sugarcane plantations and sugar mill ruins of Vieques. This tour is brought to you by the Vieques Conservation and Historical Trust and our guide, Robert Marin. Come along as we explore our island's past by visiting some of the sites and remains of the sugar industry of Vieques, Puerto Rico.
Go right through here. Mamposteria construction, essentially, involves boulders, bricks, and brick fragments held together in a lime-based mortar. You see how it falls apart in my hand. This is lime, sand, and water. A simple mortar that's not waterproof. So the whole thing would be plastered over. The final result was not this, but such was the aesthetics and the skill of 19th century builders that even though this was never to be seen, it was still a beautiful thing. Exactly the same way, except the walls of San Juan had old tile, ceramic pots, broken pots thrown in also, and then it was just plastered over. This structure was built around the time of the end of the U.S. Civil War, 1865. It was formed from the merger of two large sugar haciendas. Hacienda Martinal. Now, if you know Vieques, Martinal was on the north side of the island. This is how big this property was. And Hacienda Moray. Victor Moray and Victor Martinal, two guys named Victor, got together, joined their properties, and formed a holding that went from the north to the south, the whole middle section of Vieques. It was the second largest sugar producer on the island, but in terms of its bank value, it was the foremost because it held the lucrative middle part of the island. In the 80s, it became a hotel, the big lobby of a hotel. In 89, when Hugo came along, it ripped off the roof. And before long, an entire jungle grew up inside the building.
I stayed here once, Robert.
Did you really?
Yeah.
How was it?
Well, it was buggy, and we decided to get out the next night or night.
I see. Well, and of course in 2017, when Maria struck, the whole building came down all at once. You can still see how you can see all the pieces together. The morning after Maria, we got up and walked around, and we wanted to see what was standing and what wasn't. And we realized we lost this this old relic, the oldest relic in Esperanza. 1865. It was completely destroyed by 2017. A Hurricane Maria. So where these tracks are on the two heavy sections, okay. Here and there.
Yeah.
And that's why they're still standing, because it was built so strong. It was built to hold two different train lines. And at the end, the crane would turn on as it unloaded. And this is where this part actually collapsed. So the tracks would go all the way through here to bring on both sides to bring the sugar to the crane. The crane would grab it and put it into a bar. The tubes had the hot gases. The areas between the tubes. You take a big volume of water and divide it into discrete areas between each of those pipes. The pipes would get red hot and boil the water. The steam would come out, and the steam would power the crane as it turned and unloaded all of the locomotives. This fire tube boiler, I think, was not underground, but they decided it was cheaper than moving it, is to just dig a hole and bury it. So they just threw it in. So this part here is also part of the fire tube boiler. This might have been the furnace where the fire was, or it could have been the smokestack, either side. One side there was the burning, and the other side the steam would come out. In the 20th century, they replaced the fire tube boiler with the water tube boiler. In the water tube boiler, the water was now in the tube. But of course, because it's a smaller volume of water, it didn't produce as much steam. But it was just safer because it was less likely to explode. In 1941, the Navy came to Vieques and began closing down the last of the sugar mills. Originally, there was no objection because the Navy was hiring people for good-paying construction work, paying 50% more than field work for the sugarcane. So there was a mini boom for about a year and a half, 2 years in Vieques, in which everybody was happy. Nobody cared that they didn't have jobs in the sugarcane. Then in 1943, the Navy finally completely closed down Playa Grande and stopped hiring on the base. In the summer of 43, there was suddenly no work in Vieques. People struck in Isabel II. They carried black flags demanding work. The government of Puerto Rico stepped in and set up the Puerto Rico Agriculture Company, PRACO. And PRACO rented back from the Navy. Now the Navy is profiting from this land to grow sugarcane and to grow pineapples. And PRACO financed the construction of this structure, the pineapple factory. It was a canning facility for the pineapple that was grown on the lands leased back from the Navy. It became one of the largest employers in the 1940s in Vieques, a place that suddenly had no employment. But in 1947, in the Navy's second round of expropriations, the Navy took back all the pineapple growing land. The Navy in '63 decided to get rid of everybody in Vieques. And then not only would they make everybody leave, they were going to dig up all the cemeteries, so no one had a reason to come back.
Unbelievable.
When the press in Puerto Rico heard about this, they ridiculed it as Plan Dracula.
Operation Dracula.
And Luis Munoz Marin, who was then governor of Puerto Rico, went to JFK, who was the president at the time, and said, if you do this, there will be a black mark against you in the history books forever. And JFK agreed, and he killed the plan. And historians in Puerto Rico say that this was the time, this was the point at which the Navy stopped trying to drive employment away from Vieques. Afterwards, they tried to be relatively neutral, maybe even help the economy a little now and then. Of course, the ecology they weren't helping by endless bombing, but they were no longer trying actively to drive out all the big jobs. But this was part of one of the first big things that they came across that they had to kill off. And in 1947, it closed down. We could get a little closer. Follow me.
I told you.
They rented the structure as a dormitory for the child actors.
Whoa.
The child actors called the building Flies-Town.
Flies-Town.
You can still see above. Here's the L-O-R-D of the flies.
Wow, look
Wow.
at it on top of the building. You can see.
Right here, Lord of the
It
Flies.
says Lord of the Flies.
L-O-R-D
Okay, I see.
Of the
and here's flies.
That's
Yeah.
so cool.
Everything here? No, this is sugarcane. The only other trees you see at the very top. This is that little
Wow.
ecosystem you see to this day at the top of Monte Pirata. This was for when it reversed. You would pull a lever, sand would come down and fall onto the tracks when you went backwards. And when you went forward, this was up here, and it would drop sand in the front. Taino from other islands wanted to trade on the main island of Puerto Rico. They would stop in Vieques first, and they would stash goods, because when they went to their final destination, there was no guarantee that they would be welcomed warmly or hostilely. They didn't want to lose everything, so they would stash stuff here and go. Vieques today has like 200 archaeological sites, because everyone coming through would drop stuff here. It's sort of like the drug smugglers do that today. They send it through Vieques, because if you go right to the main island, it'll be caught right away. So it's been going on for thousands of years, literally. This was the loading dock. Now, again, in the Playa Grande was highly mechanized, and that means that most of their cane went on a rail car and was brought into the mill. You didn't need a loading dock. You need the loading dock for those people who grew the cane to sell. This was the colonia. If you had a colonia, you grew your cane and you brought it here to sell it, and it was moved into the factory. So it was an in-loading dock, not an off-loading dock. Playa Grande is a microcosm of the multicultural history of Vieques. The first family out here to grow sugarcane were the Longpre, a French family. They came out in the 1840s. In 1870, the Danish government was transforming St. Thomas into a financing hub for the sugar industry. And a Dane named Matthias Hjardemal went there, got a loan, and came and bought Hacienda Playa Grande. And he expanded it into a central, and he made it Central Playa Grande. Now, in 1890, he sold to a man from Puerto Rico named Jose Benitez Guzman. Now, he is popularly remembered in Vieques as Don Pepe. Now, I told you the story of Don Gustavo and how people had a very bad reputation, a very bad image of him. He had a very bad reputation. People think that, oh, he was the bad one. All the rest of these guys were good. There were no good owners. They were all rough. In 1900, was it, or 1910, there was a vote. There was an election. And people who lived in Playa Grande were voting in the ballot boxes. And he had his foremen, his jefes, on horseback, and they were carrying a whip. And he had instructed his men that if they saw anyone wearing a button with the name of the socialist candidate, to whip him. Wow. Because he didn't want anybody but so this, and he was the good one. So there were no good ones. These guys were all hard men. It was a hard industry. Don't have any romantic notion about how wonderful it was. No.
Yeah.
Now, the general stores of the Centrales of Puerto Rico bought substandard goods and sold them at inflated prices.
Classic.
Now, yeah. In the days of the sugar plantation, work was not year-round. Most of the work was done during the softwood, the harvest. So there were large chunks of the year where nobody worked, and you lived on credit at the company store. And you went into debt to your employer. And theoretically, by the time of the next software, you earned enough money to pay off your debts. But it keeps you. This is what happened. In the early 1800s, free black laborers from the British Islands, mostly from Tortola, heard that Vieques was being opened up. And they said, oh, we could go there, get some land, and improve our lives. So they came here and were confronted by the French, who said, no, we own it all, but you could work for us. So they began working for them and going into debt to their employers. And they very quickly realized that this was not what they wanted. A British naval ship came by, and they said to the captain, this is not working for us, take us back. So the British naval captain went to the French and spoke to them and came back and said, good news, great news. Anybody who doesn't owe money can come with me, I'll take you back. But of the hundreds of them, only 14 could go back because they all owned money. The French had found a way to make freedom as lucrative as slavery.
Yeah.
So let me tell you a bit about how the sugar was produced. Again, they crushed it in the mill and the guarapo came out. They cooked the guarapo in big pans that were 6 feet apart. This is the plaster you put on the bricks. This is everywhere else it's all come off, but it's still here. And let me point out, this is the original mortar. You see how this mortar just collapses? How it comes right out. I would guess that this is some of the earliest part of the plantation. This might be from 1845.
Okay.
It has the original plaster. We turn and we come in. There are some interesting creatures in here. The grasshoppers are fairly pedestrian. Okay.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you for the tour. We learned so much.
We hope you enjoyed this vlog and tour of the sugar mill ruins of Vieques. Thank you for watching. Please consider joining our Patreon community. Patrons get access to our research and exclusive content. Otherwise, you can stay connected by subscribing to our YouTube channel or following us on Instagram at JahFlor_VQS. Peace and love. See you next time.